Imagine waking up with no memory of the past 2 days, a killer hunting you down, and discovering that a biological weapon capable of wiping out half of humanity will be unleashed in less than 48 hours. This is exactly the nightmare Harvard professor Robert Langdon finds himself in. But here's the twist that will blow your mind. The person who created this apocalyptic plague believes he's actually saving humanity. Welcome to Dan Brown's Inferno, where Dante's vision of hell becomes terrifyingly real and the line between hero and villain disappears completely. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change how you think about overpopulation, ethics, and the future of our species. Robert Langdon wakes up in a Florence hospital with a splitting headache and retrograde amnesia. He has no idea how he got there or what happened in the last 48 hours. The last thing he remembers is walking around the Harvard campus. Now he's in Italy with a head wound, experiencing terrifying visions of hell, writhing bodies, and a mysterious silver-haired woman who keeps appearing in his hallucinations saying, "Seek and find." Before he can even process what's happening, a female assassin dressed as a police officer bursts into his hospital room and tries to kill him. A young doctor named Sienna Brooks saves his life, helping him escape through the hospital corridors. Sienna takes Langdon to her apartment, and together they try to piece together what's going on. In his jacket pocket, Langdon discovers a high-tech biohazard cylinder containing a modified version of Botticelli's map of hell, based on Dante's Inferno. The image has been altered with mysterious clues and the word "catravaser," Italian for seek and find, the same words for his visions. Langdon realizes this must be the key to understanding why someone wants him dead. As they examine the cylinder more closely, they discover it a Faraday pointer, a device used by university professors. But this one has been modified and contains hidden layers in the image. Using a projector, they discover that the modified map contains a series of letters hidden throughout, spelling out a message that references the darkest places in Dante's Inferno. Meanwhile, we learn about the mysterious figure behind everything. Bertrand Zobrist, a brilliant billionaire geneticist and transhumanist who recently committed suicide by throwing himself in the top of the Badia Tower in Florence. But before his death, Zobrist created something that has the world's most powerful organizations terrified. Zobrist was obsessed with the population crisis. He believed that humanity was on an unsustainable path, with population growth spiraling out of control. He often gave lectures showing terrifying statistics. When he was born, the world population was 3 billion. By the time of his death, it had more than doubled to over 7 billion, heading toward 9 billion. He believed that unless drastic action was taken, humanity would face catastrophic collapse through famine, disease, and war, a real-world inferno. His solution? A plague. Not one that kills, but something far more controversial. Zobrist spent years working in secret, and now Langdon and Sienna must figure out what he created and where he plans to release it. The clues in the modified map of hell lead them on a frantic chase through Florence's most famous landmarks. They visit the Palazzo Vecchio, where they examine Vasari's massive fresco and discover more hidden messages. They race to the baptistry of St. John to examine the famous mosaics depicting scenes from Dante's Inferno. Each location reveals another piece of the puzzle, but also brings them closer to the deadly forces pursuing them. They're not just being chased by the female assassin. Multiple organizations are after them. The World Health Organization has deployed a team. A mysterious private organization called a consortium, which specializes in providing elaborate deception services to wealthy clients, is also involved. Langdon doesn't know who to trust or who's actually trying to help versus capture him. The head of the consortium, a man known only as the provost, provided services to Zobrist before his death. Zobrist paid the consortium to protect something and ensure his plan was carried out, no matter what happened to him. The provost is bound by contract to fulfill Zobrist's wishes, even though he's starting to realize the magnitude of what he's protecting. As Langdon and Sienna decode more clues, they realize the key to everything lies in Dante's masterwork itself. Not just Inferno, but the entire Divine Comedy. The clues reference specific cantos, specific lines, and lead them through a literary scavenger hunt that spans centuries of art and history. They discover that Zobrist was obsessed with a specific phrase, The darkest places in hell are reserved for those who maintain their neutrality in times of moral crisis. This wasn't actually written by Dante, but it captured Zobrist's philosophy perfectly. He believed the world's leaders were remaining neutral while humanity rushed toward catastrophe, and he decided to take action himself. The trail leads him from Florence to Venice, following the path of Dante and the historical figures who preserved his work. In Venice, they explore the ancient buildings, including St. Mark's Basilica and the Doge's Palace. They meet with the museum curator, who was the last person to see Zobrist alive before his suicide. Here they learn more about Zobrist's final project. He had been obsessed with a specific location, an underground cistern, an ancient sunken palace that once stored water. The clues all point to Istanbul, specifically the Basilica Cistern, one of the most atmospheric and mysterious locations in the ancient city. But there's a complication. Langdon starts experiencing more severe symptoms from his head wound, and pieces of his memory begin returning in fragments. These memories don't quite match what Sienna has been telling him about how they met and what happened before he lost his memory. Small inconsistencies begin to emerge, planting seeds of doubt. The race intensifies as they head to Istanbul. Every organization hunting them converges on the ancient city. The WHO team, led by Dr. Elizabeth Sinsky, the Director General herself, is desperate to stop whatever Zobrist created. She has a personal connection to this case. She knew Zobrist years ago, and their philosophical disagreements about population control turned personal and bitter. In Istanbul, they descend into the Basilica Cistern, an underground cathedral of water held up by hundreds of ancient columns. The atmosphere is haunting. Dim lights reflect off the water, creating an otherworldly effect. Among these columns, two feature the head of Medusa, placed upside down and sideways for mysterious historical reasons. This is where Zobrist's clues have led them. Deep in the cistern, they discover a submerged plastic bag attached to one of the columns. Inside is a plaque with an inscription and a date, tomorrow's date. The realization hits them like a hammer. They haven't been trying to prevent the release of Zobrist's creation. They've been arriving after it's already happened. The plague has already been released. But where and what exactly did Zobrist create? As they race against time to find answers, major revelations begin to unfold. Langdon's returning memories reveal shocking truths about the past few days, about who he can trust, and about what really happened before he lost his memory. The biggest revelation concerns Sienna Brooks herself. Throughout their journey, she's been the person Langdon trusted most, his ally and protector. But as his memories return, the truth emerges. Sienna was Zobrist's partner, his lover, and his collaborator. She wasn't helping Langdon solve the mystery. She was racing him to find Zobrist's creation first, so she could ensure his plan succeeded. Sienna's backstory is tragic and compelling. She was a child prodigy with an IQ over 200, featured in documentaries about gifted children. But being that different, that intelligent, isolated her completely. She could never connect with peers, never fit in. She felt like an alien observer of humanity, rather than part of it. When she met Zobrist, she finally found someone who understood her, someone operating on her intellectual level. He became her entire world. Zobrist convinced her of his philosophy, that human population growth was the greatest threat to the species, and that inaction was immoral. He showed her the mathematics of exponential growth, the projected curves of resource depletion, the coming wars over water and food. He argued that a temporary moral compromise, releasing a plague that wouldn't kill but would solve the population crisis, was justified to prevent centuries of suffering. When Zobrist died, Sienna made it her mission to complete his work. Everything she did, saving Langdon, helping him decode clues, even getting injured protecting him, was calculated to use his expertise in symbology to find what Zobrist had hidden, while keeping him unaware of her true allegiance. The deception goes even deeper. The consortium, the organization that appeared to be hunting them, was actually hired by Zobrist to create an elaborate theater. The assassination attempts, the escape from the hospital, even Sienna's apartment, all carefully staged. They manipulated Langdon's amnesia to make him believe a false narrative, so he would voluntarily help decode the clues. But the provost, head of the consortium, begins to understand the true nature of Zobrist's creation. His organization specializes in deception, not mass terrorism or biological warfare. When he realizes what his client actually created, he breaks his contract and begins cooperating with the WHO, trying to stop the plan he helped set in motion. Dr. Sinsky and the WHO team finally catch up with Langdon in Istanbul. She reveals her history with Zobrist. They had a brief relationship years ago, bonded by their work in global health, but they had fundamentally different philosophies. Sinsky believed in education, access to birth control, and empowering women as the ethical solution to population growth. Zobrist saw these approaches as too slow, too dependent on changing human nature. Their disagreement became increasingly bitter until Zobrist disappeared to work on his secret project. The WHO team located Zobrist in Florence and confronted him before he could release his creation. In desperation, Zobrist jumped from the body of Tower rather than be captured, but his death was part of the plan. Everything was already set in motion, with instructions left with Consortium to ensure his creation would still be released on schedule. Now, everyone races to understand what Zobrist actually created and where it was released. The location is revealed to the final clues: the Hagia Sophia, the ancient cathedral-turned-mosque-turned-museum, one of the most historically significant buildings in the world. It's a perfect location to spread an airborne agent. Thousands of tourists from every country on Earth visit daily. But the nature of Zobrist's creation is even more shocking than anyone anticipated. It's not a deadly plague designed to kill billions. It's something far more complex and ethically ambiguous, a vector virus that randomly affects 1/3 of the human population, making them permanently infertile. It doesn't kill anyone. It doesn't target any specific group. It's completely random, affecting rich and poor, any ethnicity, any nationality equally. The mathematical elegance of Zobrist's solution becomes clear. Instead of killing billions or trying to control reproduction through policy, he's implemented a biological lottery that will immediately begin slowing population growth. The human population will naturally decline over coming decades without anyone dying prematurely. From his perspective, he's preventing future wars, famines, and suffering by taking action now. But the ethical horror is equally clear. Zobrist has made a unilateral decision affecting the future of the entire human species, without consent, without democratic process, without consideration of individual rights or reproductive freedom. He's imposed a solution on humanity through bioterrorism, justifying it with consequentialist ethics. The ends justify the means. The WHO team arrives at the Hagia Sophia, but they're too late. The bag containing Zobrist's creation dissolved days ago, right on schedule. The vector virus has been spreading through the tourist population for nearly a week. Thousands of people have already carried it to every corner of the globe. It's in the water supply, in the air, spreading exponentially. There is no way to contain it, no way to stop it. The scientists examine what remains of Zobrist's lab equipment and research. They confirm the virus is stable, highly contagious, but completely benign otherwise. People won't know if they're affected unless they try to conceive and fail. There are no symptoms, no way to detect it without extensive genetic testing. The final confrontation occurs in the flooded cistern beneath the Hagia Sophia. Sienna, realizing everything is lost and Zobrist's plan has succeeded, tries to escape, but she's trapped between Langdon's betrayal and the WHO agents closing in. In the dark, among the ancient columns, she makes her final stand, trying to justify what she and Zobrist have done. Sienna argues passionately that future generations will thank Zobrist for his courage. She presents the mathematics of population growth, the projections of resource depletion, the inevitability of collapse without intervention. She argues that billions of future people who have been born into starvation and misery will be spared because one man had the courage to act. Langdon confronts her with a moral counterargument. Who gave Zobrist the right to make this decision for all humanity? How is imposing sterility on random people without consent any different from the worst atrocities in human history? The eugenics programs, the forced sterilizations, the attempts to control human reproduction have always been crimes against humanity, regardless of the intentions behind them. Sienna's response is chilling. You can't control population growth through democratic means. No one will vote to have fewer children. No politician will risk their career advocating serious population control. Sometimes someone has to make the hard choice that saves civilization, even if history will hate them for it. But she miscalculated one crucial thing. The WHO team has been analyzing Zobrist's research and discovered something he didn't anticipate. The vector virus is potentially reversible. While they can't stop its spread, geneticists might be able to develop a treatment that reverses the infertility it causes. It would take years, maybe decades, but Zobrist's solution might not be permanent after all. Sienna is ultimately captured by Turkish authorities and faces prosecution for bioterrorism. But the legal situation is unprecedented. What crime has actually occurred? No one has been killed. No one has been physically harmed. The virus itself causes no symptoms or suffering. How do you prosecute someone for possibly preventing births that haven't happened yet? The book ends with profound ambiguity. The virus is out, spreading globally, and cannot be contained. In the coming months and years, its effects will become apparent as certain people discover they cannot conceive children. The global population growth rate will begin to slow, then decline. Langdon reflects on the ethical complexity of what's happened. Is Zobrist a villain or a visionary? A terrorist or a savior? The answer depends on what happens to humanity in the coming centuries. If population growth leads to catastrophic collapse, history might view Zobrist as the person who saved civilization. If humanity finds other solutions, or if his intervention causes unforeseen problems, he'll be remembered as a monster who violated the most fundamental of human rights. Dr. Sinsky prepares for the monumental task ahead. The WHO must inform world governments about what's happened, deal with the panic and conspiracy theories that will inevitably emerge, and coordinate research to potentially reverse the virus's effects. She must balance transparency with preventing mass hysteria. Langdon returns to Harvard, forever changed by his experience. He thinks about Dante's journey through hell, purgatory, and finally paradise. Dante's vision was that humanity must pass through suffering to reach enlightenment, must confront the worst of human nature to understand virtue. Zobrist created a real-world Inferno, but whether it leads to paradise or only deeper hell remains to be seen. The final scene shows Langdon teaching his class about the ethical questions that great literature poses. He discusses how Dante forced readers to confront uncomfortable questions about justice, punishment, morality, and the consequences of action versus inaction. He asks his students, when is it morally acceptable to take dramatic action to prevent future suffering? Who gets to decide what's best for humanity? And are we sometimes forced to choose between imperfect options where any choice causes harm? He doesn't provide answers because there are no easy answers. The students debate passionately, some arguing Zobrist was justified, others condemning him absolutely. The discussion continues as Langdon looks out his window at the Harvard campus, where students go about their lives unaware that some of them are already carrying Zobrist's virus, that the future of human population has already been fundamentally altered. Is overpopulation truly an existential threat to humanity? Are there circumstances where individual rights can be violated for the greater good? Who should make decisions affecting all of humanity? Is it ethical to prevent births to save future people from suffering? Would you sacrifice your reproductive freedom to potentially prevent civilizational collapse? Dan Brown massively weaves these heavy philosophical questions into a breakneck thriller that races through some of Europe's most beautiful and historically significant locations. The book is simultaneously an adventure story, an art history lesson, a meditation on Dante's timeless work, and a serious engagement with one of the most pressing questions of our time. The technical research Brown conducted shines through. The genetic engineering details are plausible, based on real emerging technologies. The population growth statistics are accurate and genuinely concerning. The ethical debates reflect real discussions happening in philosophy, bioethics, and policy circles about population, reproductive rights, and environmental sustainability. The character Zobrist is particularly fascinating because he's not a cartoonish villain. His motivations come from genuine concern about humanity's future. His actions are horrifying, but his diagnosis of the problem is difficult to dismiss completely. He represents the terrifying possibility of someone brilliant, well-intentioned, and completely convinced of their rightness doing something catastrophically wrong. Sienna Brooks is equally complex, a tragic figure whose extraordinary intelligence became a curse that isolated her from humanity, making her susceptible to Zobrist's extreme philosophy. Her genius couldn't give her wisdom, couldn't help her connect with others, couldn't show her that intellectual understanding of a problem doesn't justify any solution. The book also explores the role of art and literature in preserving ideas across centuries. Dante's Divine Comedy, written in the 1300s, still speaks to fundamental human experiences and moral questions. The great artists of the Renaissance created works that encode philosophical and spiritual truths in visual form. Langdon's expertise in symbology becomes not just a plot device, but a reminder that humanity has always used art to transmit knowledge and values across generations. Inferno ultimately asks us to confront one of the most difficult questions of our time. How do we address global challenges that require collective action when human nature tends towards short-term thinking and individual interests? Zobrist represents the authoritarian technocratic solution, the brilliant expert who decides for everyone. But Brown doesn't endorse this. Instead, he shows the moral horror of such approaches while acknowledging the real problems they claim to solve. The book's genius lies in refusing easy answers. It presents Zobrist's arguments fairly, makes readers understand his perspective, then shows why a solution is still monstrous. It's a thriller that actually makes you think. That doesn't resolve its central ethical tension, because that tension reflects real, unresolved questions facing our species. So here's what I want to leave you with. Bertrand Zobrist believed that those who remain neutral in times of moral crisis occupy the darkest places in hell. But he also shows that those who act with absolute certainty that their solution is right, who sacrifice others' freedom for what they perceive as the greater good, create their own kind of hell. The question isn't whether we should act on global challenges. We must. The question is how we act, who gets to decide, and whether we can find solutions that respect human dignity while addressing existential threats. Before you go, I want you to really think about this. If you would go back in time and stop Zobrist from releasing his virus, knowing that stopping him might lead to the civilizational collapse he predicted in the coming decades, would you do it? Would you sacrifice humanity's future to preserve the principle of reproductive freedom? Or would you accept Zobrist's violation of individual rights to potentially save billions from future suffering? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know where you stand on this impossible choice. And if this kind of deep dive into thriller novels that make you question everything about ethics, society, and human nature is your thing, you absolutely need to subscribe to this channel. We're going to explore more Dan Brown novels, other philosophical thrillers, and books that don't just entertain, but genuinely challenge how you see the world. Hit that subscribe button, because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and remember, the hardest questions rarely have easy answers.